Welcome to my American History Notes, where I, excuse me, I discuss conclusions I've drawn from studying American history. You may not agree with my conclusions, but you should know about the history that I talk about to be conversant in American history. And a lot, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I have interstitial lung disease, and it's not a good morning for breathing. So I apologize. Um, Now, I'm going to be talking, continuing the Reconstruction era, things that need to be said before I can move on. So, first, former Confederate General Nathan Bedford Forrest formed the Ku Klux Klan, supposedly to protect widows and orphans of the former Confederates, but disbanded it in 1869 when he was unable to control the increasing violence. Now, Nathan Bedford Forrest was a general who was a slave trader, who was accused of war crimes, and when the Fort Pillow massacre, was accused of overseeing that. Had a negative, very negative rap today, um, and he also hired his former slaves back. That's very misleading because the after the Civil War, slaves were or former slaves were often put back in a form of servitude by legally not being allowed to change employers. So when somebody says to you, on the other side of after the Civil War, General Nathan Bedford Forrest hired his slaves as employees, paid them a wage. Yeah, well, that was very close to being. They would be given a portion in some cases of the crop. Sometimes they weren't paid. They weren't allowed to move employment, change employment. So it was a racket after the war. So be careful when you read something like that. I have a book called Politically Incorrect Guide to the Civil War, and they make those statements that are very, very have two sides to them. So anyway, he disbanded the KKK in 1869 when he was unable to control the increasing violence. Despite Johnson, passed the tenure as President Johnson. Congress passed the Tenure of Office Act in 1867, an unconstitutional law, as it was decided decades later, which forbade the president to remove from office any federal official appointed with the advice and consent of the Senate. Johnson proceeded to remove Secretary of War Edwin M. Stanton and appoint General Ulysses S. Grant in defiance of Johnson. Grant turned the office back over to Stanton. Johnson fired Stanton again, and on February 21st, 1868, Congress moved to impeach Johnson. One vote by Edmund Ross, a senator from Kansas, saved Johnson from impeachment. Later, soon to be President Senator John Kennedy of Massachusetts would applaud Ross's courageous stand for the president in his book Profiles in Courage. The most successful accomplishment of Johnson's tortured presidency, was his purchase of Alaska from the Russians for $7.2 million. It was called Seward's Folly and Seward's Icebox. It was scoffed at during his time. William Seward was Johnson's Secretary of State. Johnson was not nominated by either party for reelection, and although he returned to government as a congressman in 1874, he died of a stroke the next year while visiting his daughter. Eliza Johnson, who had a great influence over her husband's decisions, was frail and sickly and remained mostly out of sight. Newspapers described her existence as mostly a myth. The Johnsons' daughter, Martha Johnson Patterson, was the family, quote, point man, so to speak. So we're going to continue. Next time, we're going to talk a little bit about the last great national revival and a few things there about religion, and language. And then we'll go on from there. All right. So thank you for paying attention. And even if you don't agree with what I say, don't like what I say, at least have an opinion and know about these people, places, events, dates, and concepts. Thank you very much for watching.